No mai hoki mai e te iwi, no mai hoki mai e ngā huia kai manawa. So you had your kai like huia. Did you have a lovely kai, everyone? Kia ora. So you are going to feel energized and on this high, and then you will slowly go downhill. So we're going to fight that, and we're going to make sure that we stay energized and we stay empowered and we feel our mana all the way through this afternoon. We have some incredible sessions on the way, including our panels. So the panelists, kai hea koutou, where are you now? If we could send you to the green room, please, so that you get ready and all mic'd up and hyped up and ready for our panel very soon. We were talking about the different birds and their qualities, so we know the ones that eat together are the kapai, and the one that has a puffed out chest, kereru, pohu kereru. Another one I want to share with you is what you are all being now, manawa titi. The titi is, of course, the mutton bird, and the mutton bird has this incredible resilience and also stamina. So the titi can fly for incredibly long distances. So that's why when we say to someone, kia manawa titi, may your heart be like that of the titi, then show your perseverance, your strength, your endurance to get all the way through this afternoon. Kia kaha tātou, kia manawa titi. Yes, there will be tests on the end. So you've enjoyed that so far, and now we move into, first of all, a special keynote, and then we go into our first panel discussion. Nō reira, hei timatanga e hoa mā to start us off for this afternoon. And we look again at the big goal of the BioHeritage Challenge, Whakamana. So if we look at the role of NGOs and governments in the protection and restoration of our taiao, and with particular reference to the BioHeritage Innovation Pathway approach, which is all focused on achieving big impacts for Aotearoa's environment, because this will be the way that we can really make change. Nō reira, e tika ana kia mihi ki te wahine toa nei. She was just telling me how she's on her real journey, and it is just a really easy journey, and it's coming to her so quickly. Engari tātou e hoa, ko te mea nui ke Kua whakarongo koe ki te karanga te ngākau, you've heard the call, and now we join in this journey together. Nō reira, e mihi ana ki a koe. Because she is from a very important foundation, she'll tell you more about what they're working on, enterprise with impact and environmental innovation. How do we bring these ideas to impact? Please welcome the CEO of the Ākina Foundation, Louise Aitken. Nau mai, haere mai.
Kia ora. Tēnā koutou katoa, tēnā koe Stacey. Ko Louise taku ingoa, ko Ākina Foundation toko mahi no Piniki o hau, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. As Stacey said, I am from the Ākina Foundation. Ākina, the name was gifted to us by an extraordinary kaumātua at Ngāti Porou, and it means to encourage bold action. So I plan to do that in the next 20 minutes or so, and then open it up for 10 minutes of extremely hard questions that you can throw at me in relation to impact. So Ākina is a small non-for-profit, and we are really here to transform the New Zealand economy by harnessing the power of impact. We were set up to help establish the social enterprise sector. Who knows what social enterprise is? Anyone? A few hands going up there. So the definition as such is organisations that trade for a social or environmental purpose. So that their primary purpose is the impact that they achieve, either in our society, in our communities, or in the environment. And it's pretty exciting for us at this stage where we are in an economy standpoint, where we're starting to value more than just the financial contribution organisations have. We're now a week away, just about, from the wellbeing budget. The first time that we'll really start understanding how the government is going to value more than just our GDP. How are we going to solve some of our large social and environmental issues? And at Ākina, we really believe that the economy is an important part of those solutions. So I'll get into that and really take a focus on environmental innovation, which is fantastic for us to be talking about. And I'm going to give you a sneak peek as to something that we'll be announcing with a few of our partners in the room on Sunday. So be excited when you see the slide. So when it comes to environmental innovation, our great friends at the Callaghan Institute did some research just recently saying, gosh, we're good at coming up with stuff. We're really good when it comes to how much we're investing in research and development in the environmental space, and that's really, globally, we're pretty well up there, and that's how fantastic. That's great that we've got some extraordinary, you've probably got lots of PhDs in this room and people doing extraordinary research to try and uncover the solutions for some of our really big, audacious environmental concerns. The issue is we're not really good at commercialising those. We're actually pretty rubbish at it. So we looked at this and said, well, how do we solve that? What we want is we want to be able to use our economy. We want to be able to use the ability to enter a market and sell things that have social and environmental impact. How do we do that? And this has been a challenge for Ākina and organisations like us globally for quite a number of years. In 2017, Ākina hosted the Social Enterprise World Forum in Christchurch. It was the first time that we've been able to pull together the community of social entrepreneurs in New Zealand. And we brought together 1,600 people from 43 countries. And we asked the question of, what are we going to do to pull together as a sector and to really transform the economy? And we came up with a whole bunch of things that are required. So first of all, voice is really important. You've got to be loud, you've got to be a bit of a shit stirrer, maybe, as you could say it, to be able to get the recognition for the problems that you're trying to solve. And it's really important that we start using the same language, that we start understanding that we are an iwi, a tribe, when it comes to trying to solve these issues. And we've really got to make sure that the voice of a diverse group of people is included in determining what the solutions are. We've done a lot of work in the last year to try and understand what social enterprise means in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And it's pretty exciting when we go and talk about that on the global stage. We are renowned for pulling together as a country. We are renowned for being able to have hard conversations, much more so than maybe some of our colleagues in other countries. But what we've really got to do is make sure that we are including people who don't agree with us. We are talking what we like to call outside the disco. Many people in this room will be inside the disco. We all care deeply for the environment, but what are we doing to try and influence those who don't? What are we doing to ensure that their voice is being heard and that we can try and work together for some of the solutions that we desperately need? Capability is a big one, and I probably should have put this last because that's the announcement I'm just about to make. But what we found in understanding what the needs are for environmental innovators here in New Zealand is we need to provide the right sort of capability. Now, when it comes to trading and having an enterprise, you need to be really good at the business side. You need a financially sustainable organisation in order to be able to deliver the impact that you're hoping to achieve. For a lot of people who start social and environmental enterprises, the passion is for what they do. The passion is for the impact. They might not have the business skills in order to be able to grow and scale their business. So what we're trying to do is say, how do we unlock that? Because there's a lot of amazing organisations supporting businesses right throughout New Zealand already. How can they understand what social enterprise is and be able to support and grow the social entrepreneur's capability in the financial space? On the other side is the impact. We truly believe that social enterprises will be a foundation for our economy because of the impact that they will have, that they're already having, and for many of them, they've been, this is not a new concept, certainly not when you think about this is, a social enterprise is the epitome of what Māori enterprise is. You care deeply for the land and for the people. So what we need to do is unlock the power that's within that impact. How can we help organisations start to think about the impact that they have and how to articulate that? And as of next Thursday, we'll start to see more around the Living Standards Framework. We've got the Sustainable Development Goals. How do we get people to talk about their impact in language that can be understood to these frameworks? How do we get consistency when it comes to the valuation of impact? And that's a really hard thing to do when you're right in the depths of your enterprise, doing some amazing work in your environment, is how do you think about your contribution to the Living Standards Framework or to the Sustainable Development Goals? So a huge amount of support is required there in the capability space. As any enterprise will know, anyone who has a business in this room, you need access to capital. That's really, really important. Social enterprise is absolutely no different. You need to have access to the right forms of capital to be able to help you grow. And what we did last year is launch New Zealand's first impact investment fund. We raised $9 million of private capital to be able to invest in organisations delivering impact. I never in my life would have thought I would have had anything to do with seaweed, but we invested in a seaweed company, which is a great learning opportunity for me because I didn't quite realise the whole carbon benefit of seaweed, nor did I realise the pharmaceutical and nutritional benefits of seaweed. So I'm on a journey, and probably if I get asked to speak next year, I'll bring some samples that you can all buy. But for us, it's about how can we access the right forms of capital to inject organisations through to scale? How can we connect them with the markets that they're able to sell their products at? And more importantly, how do we provide them the capability that they need? Since we launched our tiny little fund, and I often get told this, that 9 million is nothing when it comes to the investment, impact investment capital that's out there, we've had 5 funds either launched or under development from the philanthropic community. And we think there's probably another $100 million of impact investment funds that will soon be hitting the market. And that's extremely exciting for us. But the issue is, who are they going to invest in? Which gets us back to the capability question. The next big opportunity that we have is in the procurement space. As an enterprise, you have a good or a service that you want to sell. Who are you going to sell it to? How can we enable the access to markets whereby that impact is valued by the person purchasing it? We're all consumers here. We can choose what we buy. We can choose who we buy from. What about thinking about that dollar that you're buying a good for? Where are you going to, who are you going to buy your good or product from? What choices do you have as far as the environmental or social impact that that organisation is delivering? What's the good or the service that can actually make a difference over and above just you purchasing it? When we think about procurement, that's even a bigger opportunity, and I'll freak you out with some a figure on my next slide. The other key opportunity that we see is around partnerships. We are very lucky in New Zealand to have very, very flat structures. It's relatively easy to get in and to talk to senior officials within government, to talk to ministers, to talk to CEOs. But it's really about how do you align with the organisations that are truly values aligned with you, and how do you strike partnerships where you can unlock the strengths that you both bring. And it's really important for us, particularly as a very small NGO, that we're able to work with other organisations to deliver joint impact or joint outcomes. And what we see is more and more move towards this. More big corporates are starting to understand that they can't do things on their own. They must go in partnership with organisations who understand some of the real meaty problems that are being faced in society and our environment. And the more we value and celebrate partnerships, the more it will become a real normal way of doing business. The other big opportunity for us is around policy levers. This time last year, we signed a 3-year partnership with the New Zealand government to establish the social enterprise sector. And we really saw that as the opportunity to not only talk to government about what social enterprise is and how social enterprises are contributing to government's outcomes, but we saw a huge opportunity to influence change. Just before Easter, we launched a piece of research to challenge our legal structures in New Zealand. We want to change to the Companies Act because we think that organisations that deliver impact should be recognised and valued in our business context. We've got a long way to go to make that happen, but what we want to do is demonstrate our economy is different now, and our government should be responding to that. They've already done a great move with the Living Standards framework, but it's about how do we start to have a bigger conversation around the economy and the support that's required to build that economy valued on impact. So those are the big things. Procurement, as I said, is probably one of the biggest levers we have. Who here buys stuff for the organisation that they work at? Whether it's you have a credit card or you're in your procurement team. Right. New Zealand businesses spent $561 billion last year on procurement. That's a rather large number. That's bigger than any corporate social responsibility program globally. combined. What we've got in our procurement spend when it comes to central, local government and corporate supply chains is the absolute ability to find solutions to solve our environmental and corporate problems. If organisations even thought 1% of their procurement spend went to organisations who deliver impact, we will see a significant growth of not only the social enterprise sector, but also of community enterprise who deliver goods and services within their own communities, and particularly organisations starting to think different about the power that sits within the goods and services that they buy. About 3 weeks ago, we announced that our 12 foundation members of our social procurement program have a combined spend of $27 billion. That's 12 organisations. And that's just the first buyer group we're putting together. And we hope to hit $50 billion by the end of this calendar year. These organisations, and there's a couple in the room, so we've got Auckland Council here, I know. Auckland Council said absolutely they are on a journey. They recognise that they buy a lot of stuff. How do they get better at understanding how they can deliver impact by buying that stuff better? And more importantly, how can we help them value the impact that's being delivered as a result of that purchasing spend? So that's pretty exciting for us. We don't even need to think it as these big corporates. Think about it in your own organisation. If you're a small organisation and you're committed to environmental impact, well, make sure you're spending your money that demonstrates that. Because if you're not, what a wasted opportunity. And what we're doing on the other side of the buyer side is we're certifying social enterprises. So you can easily identify those who do deliver impact. And you're able to connect with them relatively easily. And more importantly, they will tell you the impact that they have. And many of them are already aligning to things like the SDGs and hopefully soon the Living Standards Framework. So social enterprise is growing in New Zealand. I always like saying about when I say 3,711. Social enterprises contributing over $1 billion to the New Zealand economy. The figure that's missing in that is I can't tell you at the moment what's the value of the impact they deliver. But I can absolutely guarantee it'll be probably 100 times more than that 1 billion contribution. What we want to be able to do is hopefully in a couple of years is have that third figure up here so that we start moving away from just this fiscal view on enterprise. We start moving away from the fiscal view of the charitable sector and we actually start celebrating the positive social and environmental impact that they're having. So just before I finish, I'll get into the big news. We've got extraordinary organisations, and I've put some of their logos up on here, who support the growth of environmental innovation in Aotearoa, New Zealand. All of these organisations in part are playing a part in being able to support the growth of impact through innovation, trying to solve some of our big meaty problems that we have, whether it's climate change, whether it's water, whether it's land use. What we had looked at about a year ago with a supportive partner called WWF, who's a great brand to be walking alongside, is we said, how do we connect all of these organisations? How do we actually make system change when it comes to supporting the access of capability build, access to markets, and access to capital? So this Sunday at Zealandia, we are launching a program called 9 Wire. And the reason why we called it 9 Wire is that number 8 wire isn't enough anymore. We have to have a systems approach when it comes to really solving some of our big social and environmental issues. And 9 Wire is all about bringing ideas to impact. It's all about helping environmental innovators navigate through the complex journey of getting to scale, navigating through the complex world of trying to find funding, navigating the complex, hugely complicated scenarios to try and get the innovation support, the scientific support, the access to the right policy changes that they need. So with partners such as Auckland Council, Department of Conservation, MPI, DOC, we've pulled together the bridge, as we like to call it, where we will work with environmental innovators, we will understand what their needs are, and we will build the bridge to the solution. It's a 12-month at least. The first year will be a pilot where we're providing capability support directly to those innovators, to be able to get them access to the right forms of capital that they need, to be able to hopefully accelerate their growth, whether it's through scientific support or it's about being able to unlock the right support they need from a business point of view so that they'll be able to scale. It's the first time in New Zealand we've ever had an actual collaboration between those who actually support the growth of environmental innovation, and we all know that we bring something different. We all know that we either bring capability support, like Ākina does, we would bring brand and voice like WWF does, whether we bring access to a market like the Auckland Council does. So it's pretty exciting for us. It's been a year of hustle to try and get it over the line, and what we're hoping to see is a flurry of activity with organisations who are going to apply for the support. We've done something a little bit different this year in the creation of this program, is we've said there's lots of different types of innovators. So how are we going to attract those innovators? So on Sunday, when we launch this program, we hope that there'll be a lot of media, and we'll hope that there'll be a lot of discussion on Monday morning around the water cooler. If you are or you know somebody who is doing some really cool stuff in the environmental space, send them our way. We've got a really innovative application process whereby they'll be given capability support during the application process itself, and hopefully we'll be in a year's time be able to talk about the great innovation that we've enabled. Because ultimately it's all about these. It's all about unlocking innovation through not only environmental innovation through enterprise, but also really understanding that we have to do it collaboratively and we have to do it together. So I'll leave you with this last slide. We often get told as social enterprises that we sit on the side of stuff. We're not part of the economy, we're kind of a little nice to have on the side. Our challenge as Ākina is we are business, we're not business-like. And our job is to really redefine what enterprise means. So, tēnā koe, thank you very much for having me here, and I look forward to the last 6 minutes or so, and hoping to be able to answer some of your tough questions you're going to throw at me. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Louise. Tēnā koe, Louise. Thank you so much. She did mention hustle, so I hope there'll be some hustle via the questions. And thank you for actually asking questions. It must be because you're scientists and you know how to make inquiries. I've just been at 2 writers' festivals over the last 2 weekends, and they stand up and they don't ask questions, they just give statements. Considering they're writers, they should really understand the definition of a question, and you guys do. From Dambi, how does Ākina evaluate their impact, and are iwi Māori tribes involved?
Yeah, great question. As we are, a leader in impact enterprise, we'd better articulate our impact well. It is a journey. We use a thing called a theory of change or a logic model to be able to understand the impact that we achieve and how we do that. And we're very lucky to have some pretty amazing partners such as the Māori Women's Development Inc. And others helping us understand what that means from a tikanga standpoint. So absolutely we're on a journey, but it is really important to be able to start that journey and articulate that. So as of Friday we are relaunching our website, and you can go on and see what our theory of change is.
And I'll follow up with a question that's similar. Many environmental NGOs have been accused of human rights breaches, especially as they relate to Indigenous people. So how do you ensure your partners are the right partners?
Yeah, our job at Ākina is to really walk alongside organisations. We ask generally the hard questions, and that's really important to us. It's not just about doing something, whether it's a corporate social responsibility program or a charitable donation. You've got to think about the decisions you're making, as particularly as a business. How are they addressing or how are they delivering positive impact, but also what are you doing to reduce the negative impact that you have? And some of our partners, absolutely, particularly at the big end of town, have a long way to go when it comes to understanding or reducing the negative impact that they have. So, yeah, you've got to just be bold and ask the right questions, I think.
And I might roll these two into one. Do you think that this kind of impact investment can only be supported by a current capitalist economic paradigm, or can it be supported by alternative economic models too? And you see why I'm going to put it into how should we view procurement when living out our business values.
Yeah, we're trying to get away from, obviously, a capitalist conversation. We really think that we should be moving to a human economy, whereby organisations are valuing the contribution they make, not only in a financial sense. We've just done our piece of legal research, and we go into a whole conversation around charitable donations. You make money on one side of the coin and you give away on the other. And that's worked, okay. For a long period of time, but why do we still have the big social and environmental issues that we have? So it's important now for organisations, wherever they are in the ecosystem, whether they're government, whether they're philanthropy, whether they're business or social enterprise, to recognise everyone has responsibilities and everyone must be able to contribute positively. So it's really important for us to unlock where that can happen, and procurement is one example. Big businesses buy a lot, so why don't we use that to deliver social and environmental positive outcomes? If organisations are investing, why shouldn't they focus on the positive environmental or social outcomes rather than just focus on reducing the negative? These are really big questions for our economy as a whole. One figure we like to talk about a lot is there's $500 billion of funds under management globally that are termed impact investment. And that's pretty exciting. But that's only a drop in the ocean when you come to think about funds under management within our whole economy. So how do we get organisations to think bigger than just what they're doing today? And consumers, investors and employees are demanding it. So our voice is getting louder.
So a final question. I mean, you're rocking like you do these press conferences every day. So let's pretend you are in government. So how can Ākina work with government to procure service from SMEs, women, Māori, rural of New Zealand to support system change for better sustainable development and environmental management? Just a minute 30 to answer that.
Yeah. I think it is a real journey. I have to commend MB. They're just about to release their new rules of sourcing, which actually instructs government entities to focus on the environmental and social impact. It actually calls out community, iwi, and social enterprises as really important within the process of procuring goods and services. And that's the first time it's ever been written on a piece of paper like that. So what we need to do is, as an organisation, as Ākina, partnered with government, we need to make it easier for them to do it, which is why, in the negotiations that I went through with our government partnership, gave them all free access to our procurement platform. Not because it was something I gave up to them, it's just I want their procurement spend within the platform. And so we've already got 3 entities, one being Inland Revenue, actually. Whoever would have thought they're probably the most innovative when it comes to social procurement. But also, really importantly, corrections. Corrections are doing an extraordinary job of trying to figure out the stuff that they buy, how can they get offender outcomes? Because that's fundamentally what the corrections are there to do. So why not use the assets and facilitation contract that's just come up to actually get people who are transitioning out of prison employment? This is naturally something you should think about. Why shouldn't Housing New Zealand be focused on apprenticeships and being able to every house that's being built, to be able to reduce not only the amount of rubbish that's going to landfill, but also giving great employment opportunities for those who might not have that chance, because that's fundamentally what government should be doing.
And that is fundamentally 1 second over your time. Tēnā koe. Thank you so much. The CEO of Ākina Foundation, Louise Aitken. Tēnā koe. Thank you. So a wonderful way to start our afternoon. And now we go into a panel, so the panel can start to move this way. And I look around and I consider this a compliment. The reason that you won't need an introduction to the panel MC is because I consider you, as an audience, peak RNZ. So the challenge you'll have is that you'll see the face for a change, unless you're looking on social media, and you'll know the voice. What you may not know is that she was also the International Radio Personality of the Year. Yes, International Radio Personality of the Year in 2012. But she is someone... who is renowned in many ways for asking all the right questions in the best ways that I personally love. So please welcome our panel MC, Kim Hill.
Kia ora, thank you. We're here to discuss the pros and cons of philanthropic investment. We all on the same page here? Jolly good. And of course, who could argue with philanthropy? The desire to promote the welfare of others by the generous donation of money to good causes. In the United States, where gazillions of dollars are generously given, the virtues of philanthropy have become tainted by, for example, the Sackler family, who made billions boosting consumption of OxyContin, fueling the opioid epidemic while also giving a lot of money for, quote, a better world, unquote. In the 1880s, Andrew Carnegie, possibly the richest American who ever lived, gave vast endowments to universities and famously public libraries. His money came from railroads and steel and from, as it's been described, ruthlessly exploiting his employees. So I'm not suggesting for a moment that philanthropy always has a dark side or is always about image laundering. But does it matter where the money comes from if it's going to a good cause? And in New Zealand, with the ambitious goal of predator-free New Zealand bearing down on us, as well as the environmental problems generally that we face, can we afford to be fussy about who's funding the effort? These are the unpleasant, skeptical hypotheticals that I'm kind of trained to think about, but then I'm not at the impoverished, sharp end of our efforts to salvage our biodiversity and improve our science, although Radio New Zealand always accepts checks. Doesn't, actually. Sorry, that was a bad joke. We can't even accept checks. The members of our panel today are, however, experts in that area. Some brief introductions, as you will no doubt know them already. Political scientist Aroha Mead, prominent here and overseas, on the issues of Indigenous cultural and intellectual property and sustainable development. She's just returned from the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, familiarly known as ISPPBES, in Paris, which unsurprisingly concluded that nature is decreasing at an alarming rate and that Indigenous people have a particular role to play in reversing that trend. Professor Bruce Clarkson of the University of Waikato leads the program aiming to restore nature in urban environments, where 87% of New Zealanders live, by the way. He's one of New Zealand's foremost authorities on ecological restoration, and he asks, what if cities are seen not as a problem, but the solution to saving biodiversity? And of course, that's where the rich people live, right? Nathalie Whitaker has been a philanthropy enabler for a long time, even though she looks only 14 years old. She founded New Zealand's first crowdfunding site, Give a Little, in 2007. It was subsequently sold to the charitable arm of Spark, which now funds Give a Little to the tune, I think, of around $800,000. She doesn't know. Since then, she has been trying to, as she put it to me a little earlier, I said, well, figure out how to get access to money. Good luck to you. Give a Little raised $2.3 million to keep our Aroha Beach public. Government contributed $350,000, I think. That was a major media splash. Whether it was a good idea or not, I don't know. Hania helps run Next Foundation, a privately funded New Zealand philanthropic foundation. It was established by Neil and Annette Plowman in 2014. And it had a mandate to invest, has a mandate, to invest $100 million over 10 years into environmental and educational projects. Jan's also director of Taranaki Maunga, the ecological restoration of the Maunga and its neighbouring peaks. Professor Shaun Hendy, his day job is physics nanotechnology. He's the director of Te Punaha Matatini, a centre of research excellence hosted by the University of Auckland. and an outspoken commentator on the need for scientists to speak out on environmental issues or anything else. Come to that. He was a close colleague of the late Sir Paul Callaghan, who, of course, expression crazy and ambitious gives the title to this conference. Have you stopped flying yet, Shaun, or started flying yet, more to the point?
I'm back flying again.
You're back flying again, yeah. Have you given up eating meat?
Sorry?
Have you given up eating meat?
No.
No, just checking your credentials.
No.
I'm working.
All right, welcome to all our panel, please, ladies and gentlemen. Are you all, one way or another, in receipt of philanthropic funding? Is anybody not in receipt of philanthropic funding? You are not.
Currently not. At this moment in time, not.
No.
But I hope to be.
Yeah.
See Nathalie afterwards.
Just tell me about what you're doing, Nathalie, at the moment, because it seems to go not to the heart of philanthropy, but as you and Jan were explaining to me earlier, what sort of comes next? Explain.
Okay, sure. In my experience with Give a Little, I came to understand intimately how New Zealanders give and why. And at the end of an 8-year period running Give a Little, I sort of felt a little underwhelmed. Like, people would pat me on the back and say, you know, that's an amazing thing that you've done, don't you feel great? And actually I felt really deflated. And I couldn't work out why. And it was really because actually the experience that I had with Give a Little proved to me that as a country we're very generous, but we're really generous when it comes to spotting problems, when it's all too late. And we do a really poor job of investing together in opportunities and in solutions. And this became almost a bit of an obsession for me when I probably should have been relaxing a little bit, and decided to work out how it is that we need to kind of find more funding that can more neutrally attach to outcomes. And that's taken me down a mine shaft, and in a collaboration with Shaun and 3 other really amazing co-founders, to understand the role that data plays in basically building the case to invest earlier, before all of the problems are manifest. So Louise pointed out just in the last speech that there's a vast amount of capital that's starting to pool in the financial markets for impact. Some specifically, you know, some funds specifically for impact investment, but a whole lot of capital that could move for that.
What is impact investment? Is this a new 21st century expression?
I'm going to pass that to Jan.
Jan, impact investment.
I'll give it a crack. You know, I think what we're talking about is how we measure the return on an investment to achieve the outcome that you're hoping to solve. So, for instance, if you were looking to remove predators or bring back species in this particular environment, what is the cost and how do you know that you've achieved it, and when will you know you've got there? You can't manage what you can't measure, so measuring impact is critical for investors and people who manage these things to achieve these outcomes.
Why is that so hard?
Well, where do we start? There are so many dimensions which are variable in the environmental sector. Nature is a complex ecosystem, a complex web of things going on. Your interventions can only be at points and places and at different parts of an evolution of an ecosystem web. What we do here may not have a direct impact here, but we need to be able to measure how our investment can make an impact at some point, and then we can invest some more to see which way we're trending in terms of our investment return.
You know how to ask these questions, right? I don't see any questions coming up on the screen, but if anybody asks a question, I'll just see it in front of me, will I?
Yes, you will.
Jolly good. Aroha, you're shifting in
Yeah,
your
I
seat.
am. I guess I have a kind of different take on philanthropy, because as a concept, it gives a preferential status to those who give money over those who give time. And I really would like to just acknowledge that 1 in 3 New Zealanders volunteers their time. And I looked up before I came, an estimated 157 million hours of voluntary time is spent by New Zealanders every year, which comes to about $3.46 billion of voluntary labour. And this country and every other country could not exist without the philanthropy of time that people give. And we should never underestimate its importance. But I also think that philanthropy is not a neutral space. It's a very colonial background to it. And what we don't want to see happening as we move into the future is as they call them, the philanthropic capitalists, who are just using the market, which is the same market that has caused so much of the environmental problems that we have now, as a way of trying to do good. That if we can't use philanthropy to fundamentally shift power, who is involved in projects, and give more voice to communities, to volunteers, to tangata whenua, then all we're doing is more of the same.
You put it very well in I don't know, was it in Paris that you said this? Nature's decline is driven by a predominant economic and political system that favours increasing consumption and growth over living in harmony with nature.
Yeah. And we were actually able to get that statement through 165 countries, trying to make sure that it was edited out. But the truth of the matter is, if you look at all the scientific evidence, capitalism has been a major factor in why we're experiencing environmental decline right across the globe and in unprecedented numbers. So we can't look to that same value system, be it in government or be it in NGOs or be it in the philanthropic.
Well, in that case, you wouldn't take any philanthropic money, right?
You
what am I
would,
thinking
but
of?
you'd
Tyndall
look for
Foundation,
Yeah.
you know, reliant for its wealth on, you know, huge shops selling stuff that people don't really need.
Yeah.
I mean, that goes to the heart of your criticism, doesn't it?
I need everything that I buy. As an open consumer.
How many pairs of shoes have you got, really? No, but you know what I mean. You can't, if we are too critical of the system, then we don't take any money and we're left in the crap.
I think the scale of the problem, though, is so huge. We do need everyone to contribute, but we don't need more of the same. We need different ways of doing things.
So I think it's beholden upon the philanthropist to not walk in and say, we have the answer, and this is the structure, and this is how we're going to do it. It's now we need to learn how to walk in and say, what is the question? Is there really a mandate for us to be here? And then what is the structure or way that we can actually create the space for this to be answered?
Bruce, I want to get your take on philanthropy because you've had oceans of it washing through your door, don't you?
I just came back from the US on a trip where I was funded by philanthropy.
Yeah? Where'd you go? Las Vegas.
Missouri Botanical Garden. No, I didn't go to Las Vegas on the Strip. I went to Missouri Botanical Garden, actually,
Yeah.
for a workshop on health, human health and urban restoration and the interplay between the two things. It's really interesting listening to my colleagues here on the left.
Such interesting takes, right? I'm really interested in it. We'll get to the question in a minute, yeah.
Because I made up a little list of the things to watch out for in philanthropy, because in my role at the University of Waikato, every year we bring in approximately, well, more than, in fact, $5 million a year in philanthropic funding. But it's an extremely broad, I mean, philanthropy is extremely broad. It can range from somebody knocking on your door and saying, here's the cash, do what you like with it, through to people who come in and expect you to develop a very tight-knit contract to deliver some outcomes of the nature that Jan was describing, and everything in between. And so I've got some thoughts about what makes a good philanthropist, and I've also got some thoughts about things to watch out for with philanthropy, which we may get to eventually, but I thought I would just comment first on what I think makes a good philanthropist, and it's not the one that walks in the door and just gives you the cash. Surprisingly, people might think that's what I might like, but actually it's the one that wants to form a relationship with you, which focuses on delivering some form of impact, where you can work together and learn from each other to actually deliver something of significance. And in my case, if it's a project to do with restoring nature, then it's right at the top of the list. And I will work with any philanthropist to make sure that we could deliver on that sort of funding.
On the basis that if you work with the philanthropist, it increases the volume of the cash
No,
you've got the dialogue going on,
yeah,
spreading
so
ripples.
there's public and private money available, and philanthropy is critical often for top-up. We simply do not have enough funding in New Zealand to deliver all the ecological benefits that we need to restore nature. We just don't have to. So the question is, how do we put together portfolios of funding in order to deliver the result that we're seeking? So, you know, I think it's really important that we do think carefully about how we use philanthropy. And there is, some people have sometimes referred to philanthropy as a form of dancing with the devil. My view is that it's actually not to that extent a problem, because everyone has the right of refusal. And I have on a number of occasions exercised the right of refusal.
Who have you refused and why?
And that is because when they come in the door with the big cheque and say to you, will you prove this? Will you provide evidence for that? Will you find the answer which helps me advance my private cause? And as a scientist, immediately, I've got a problem with that. So those are the sorts of rights.
Do you get that too, Shaun?
Not so much. No, I don't have a lot of people turning up, handing over cheques.
But I mean, in general sense,
Yeah,
people
look,
funding science or investigations that they want the right answer to.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, the you know, that government funding, which is these days the largest form of funding, often comes with those kind of caveats, right? When you're working with a ministry, perhaps getting direct funding from that ministry, there's often pressure, you know, and you're aware that people's careers depend on some of the answers coming out certain ways.
One of the questions kind of goes to that issue in a way. Is there a danger that philanthropic funding can skew or undermine priorities determined by other, potentially carefully thought out processes?
Yeah, I mean, I think for sure. I mean, science actually, I mean, we've been in bed with philanthropists for a very long time, actually. That's prior to, you know, we've only had government funding for science for around about 100 years. Before then, it was pretty much all philanthropic funding. And, you know, and so the priorities were very much determined by you know, rich white people in the UK, and you just have to go to the Natural History Museum in London or the British Museum to see what they were up to. You know, they were going out and they were taking stuff back to the UK. And so we've had this complicated relationship for a long time, I think, with funding, and we've got to accept that it does, you know, it changes our priorities and it determines the types of questions that we can ask.
Questions for Aroha and Jan, because essentially what Aroha was suggesting a little earlier, specifically what strategies should we use to decolonise philanthropy? What does that expression mean to you, Jan, decolonising philanthropy?
So that's a question about equity, I think, and ensuring that you can reconcile equity in these projects and in these processes that we're developing. And as I was saying earlier, it's not turning up with an answer, it's turning up questioning whether you have a mandate to be there in the first place, and then what are the questions that need to be answered from that community, and then working alongside that community as to how you're going to solve it. That would be one way. And I think also philanthropy as an industry, as an entity, needs to realise it's only one player in a community, alongside Māori, alongside government, alongside other NGOs, and especially alongside communities. No one player is going to solve these complex, wicked problems that we're dealing with, but together with the diversity of the approaches and learnings from those various sectors, and sort of, you know, making equal, bringing equity to the solution, can you actually have some way of going forward?
Aroha.
I think one of the important things to change is an explicit acknowledgement that culture, social, economics, environment, spiritual are all interrelated. So when projects are being developed, all of these are equally important. And if philanthropic investment is all pushed into one area at the expense of the others, then you end up with quite askew results. You might save a species, but in the process you might have diminished the livelihoods of people, or you might have dramatically altered the landscape. But also we need to be looking at not just sharing power, but transferring power from central government to communities, to Māori in specific. We are in the state we are in New Zealand, even though we are one of the countries that has the highest percentage of conservation estate for the land. Why are our species continuing to decline? Because those weren't the main areas that had the species, but also they weren't being managed. And so we've developed a culture of ownership, we as in the Crown, so not me, very good at owning, very good at controlling access, not good at managing, and not good at being a good caretaker. So if we don't shift that fundamental mindset that the best people to take care of our amazing environment, our taonga species, is us, the people. It's actually not government. And we shouldn't look to government to be the one to give all these solutions.
That idea of a certain amount of money or effort skewing things away from other areas goes to a question that we have here. Is philanthropic investment in conservation New Zealand too single species focused? You know, got your charismatic megafauna. Or do iconic species serve the purpose of attracting investment that would otherwise not be given? Yeah. And, you know, we look at the kakapo, we look at the Pūtakawa Project Crimson. Do any of you, let me ask you, Bruce, because you've had dealings with this, is that a problem?
Well, one of the things about this is that if you study ecosystems, of course, you can take a view that by picking an umbrella or a focal species and attracting the money using that focal species, you are then providing benefit to a wider landscape or a wider ecosystem. So it does come down to how you define the objectives of your project.
You mean nothing wrong with marketing?
Well, I wouldn't be picking the mice, but for example,
save the mice.
If it was bellbird or tui, or if it was, you know, some other native bird, there's a very good chance that if you put investment into protecting that population and reducing the predators, that you're going to get other spill-off benefits. And so you have to be a bit careful about not making it a black and white scenario. We had a similar question in the previous panel, which was talking about the skewing of how conservation and restoration approaches problems in New Zealand by focusing on predators. Does that skew the system? My view on that is that there has been a bit of a shift and a bit of a skewing of the system, because along the way somewhere we tend to have forgotten the importance of high quality habitat, restoring habitat and rebuilding habitat. And I would say that those elements are different sides of the same coin.
What you mean you could resurrect the mammoth, but where are you going to put it?
Well, so for example, you can kill the pests in an urban environment and still generate a very good, healthy bird population, but the bird population is surviving by living on parklands and exotic trees, while the other components of the indigenous ecosystem are still being reduced. So again, it's a question of having a clear idea about what you're trying to achieve with your project. And if the consequence of the predator removal in an urban setting is that we only get the birds, then I would say we haven't done the proper job.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're trying to get philanthropic money to something, you have to say, don't you, if you give us this money, then we will see this measurable return, right? Yep. And if you're arguing for the recreation of an entire ecosystem, that's way down the track, and it's not going to...
No, we're already doing it, actually. Come to Hamilton sometime and I'll show you.
All right. So it's not, it doesn't get too complicated that it becomes impossible.
No,
it's
I don't believe
feasible.
so.
All right.
I don't believe so.
All right.
Any farmer knows that if you close the back paddock and stop putting the top dressing on, that you can actually recreate an indigenous forest ecosystem quite quickly in New Zealand. If you're in the right climatic zone, that is.
In terms of philanthropy, there's a question here, is there not scope to help teachers financially? This sounds like a self-serving question to me, but I'll run it through. I'll run it through the panel. Is there not scope to help teachers financially to engage more with environmental restoration education through philanthropy?
I can answer that, yes. Because the university gets philanthropic money all of the time to support particular programs, of educational programs, and also to support development of masters and PhD students. So yes, that is happening already. I guess the questioner may be more interested in secondary school or primary or whatever, but I believe there are similar programs out there. For example, I think Air New Zealand gives money for primary school programs relating to environment.
The ethical issue of philanthropic money, and it's not so severe here because less money goes to philanthropic causes than in America, where literally billions and billions and billions goes, thereby depriving the government of a certain amount of taxation, right? I mean, it's not a win-win necessarily, philanthropy. And there's a question there that if the tax system worked, much of the philanthropic money would be in the hands of elected representatives. Is that not better? I mean, we're taking money from people who should have paid it in taxes, perhaps. Does that enter into our calculations here? You're nodding, Nathalie.
Well, I think part of the issue is that we have to ask what the motivations of the philanthropy is. We have a real challenge, I think, joining the idea of philanthropy motivating the public to take greater responsibility if that philanthropy has been sourced through a controversial activity. I think the public really need to see high integrity from the philanthropic endeavours if they're going to mobilise their efforts and their resources behind it. But I do think that there is a bit of a challenge there, for sure, if we're wanting to make sure that we can maximise the results that we get from the philanthropy, for sure.
And of course, the more money that you take through philanthropy, the more you enable the government to say, well, you don't need that bit of taxpayers' money, do you? So
this is true. This is true. I think it's really problematic that we're told, on a 3-year cycle to trot off to the polls and vote the parties that represent our morals and values. And we hope that the government of the day will be able to take bold action that affirms that decision that we've made. But we often see philanthropy being able to come out with the big wins and do the bold things that kind of want to attach to our hearts. And I think there is a bit of a democratic challenge here that we have with philanthropy, is that we do need to make sure that the philanthropy is actually listening to what the public want, not just what the philanthropist wants as well. Because if we want to really affirm and mobilise the public, we need to align with that.
I asked Bruce this. He said he had no problem because he could whisk up a biodiversity environment in no time at all in Hamilton. But there is a question. Hey, how do those who work for long-term systems, attitudinal and policy changes show impact? It can take decades to affect these changes. And that's quite right. Any comment on that from you?
Yeah, so impact assessment doesn't necessarily mean that you have to show the impact immediately at all. In fact, the Biological Heritage Challenge is an exact example of how many of the impacts that come from the work being undertaken in the challenge may not be realised for several generations.
No, but I mean, there is a serious concern that predator-free New Zealand 2050 is not going to happen unless there's a massive attitudinal change.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I'm reading between the lines, and it's saying, we haven't got a hope in hell, right?
Yeah, well, I'm not really an expert in predator-free New Zealand, but I can say that in many long-term systems, like in terms of reconstructing a native forest or whatever, that you can show stages of impact along the way. So there are ways of monitoring the system to show that you meet critical thresholds where you're starting to get a healthy functioning system back, and progressively you're building the diversity and richness of the community, and that you're heading in the right direction. So I don't believe that you need to demonstrate impact immediately, and I'm sure that Jan's in a similar position with his project Maunga, that you can't expect that there will be a delivery of the ultimate goal. That is an intergenerational thing. We're talking intergenerational projects here, but you can measure things along the way and take a staged-based approach to monitoring and demonstrate that you're on the right trajectory to getting the result that you need.
Aroha, any comment on that?
Well, I think it's important to set bold visions. We need them as a generation to be able to say to the generations that come behind us that we stood for something, that we tried to do something. And really, once you start on that pathway, you don't fail. you may not reach your original target, but you can't say you've failed because you've achieved things along that way. And I'd actually like us to see, I'd like to see more bold visions being put out there for us, because that's what inspires people to action and to change.
They can't be just aspirational though, can they? They have to be in some way achievable.
There's got to be some standing behind it. I mean, one of the visions that was made some years ago in Ngā Pai o Te Maramatanga, which is the Māori Centre Research Excellence, was to create 200 Māori PhDs. And I remember reporting that to the Commerce Board at Victoria University when I was there, and my colleagues all burst out laughing and just said, oh, don't be silly. Why would you set a target like that? You know, why don't you go for something achievable like 2 or 3 a year?
Incrementalism.
And in any event, we're up to 600 Māori PhDs now. So, you know, you set a bold vision, you get a bold outcome. So
I think, there's also intent to measure, right? And intent to pass that learning on to future generations. And so monitoring as you go, you know, even if you've got big, bold visions, you know, putting down the waymarkers as you go and passing those learnings on to future generations, even in long-term challenges, I think there's real value in that. And we so often don't do it. We'd like to think we do, but often everything happens when the cheque gets handed over, and then we all go back to doing what we were doing before, and there's very little record kept of what actually happened.
Right. And I take Aroha's point that she made earlier, that philanthropy is seen to be, you know, lashings of cash, but all the volunteers that work on the environment at the moment, or anything else, are in effect philanthropists giving their time. And in fact, the recent report on the BioHeritage Challenge says that practically 100% public support is necessary for predator-free New Zealand by 2050, apart from anything else.
And that's been tested here in Wellington in a quite sophisticated way, and it's 94%. And only those people who haven't agreed are ones who just want a little bit more. It's growing, and it's growing by the day.
But 94% doing something, or 94% saying, gosh, I'm glad my neighbour's doing something.
94% who agree with the outcome. But let's talk about...
But who doesn't agree with the outcome? But you've got to put your...
You'd be surprised.
You've got to put your... No, I wouldn't. But you've also got to do... You can't just say, gosh, that's a good idea. You have to put a bit of yourself up there, don't you?
And you need a way to find your place in doing something in a way that suits your situation as well. And I think that leads to another part of the conversation, which is what are all the other consequences and all the other outcomes that are achieved by being part of a larger movement? You're building community resilience, you're building capability, you're building connectivity, you're building capacity. Social capacity overall is building because you're connecting towards a common goal that no one individually could have achieved on their own.
So what we should... I mean, I take it that you all think that more philanthropic money should be going to environmental issues. The stats are that something like 3% of our philanthropic money goes to environmental issues at the moment, and something like 19-20% goes to sport and recreation. So you all think... No, Nathalie doesn't quite think that.
Oh, no, I definitely do. In terms of a proportion of current philanthropy, I think we need to start seeing as a major swing towards environmental.
But taking away from what?
Well, not a zero-sum game.
I would hate to say what, but I do think that if we don't start waking up to the reality that the environment is the foundation of everything,
right,
then we're in big trouble. I just think that we do have to challenge the economics, though, as well. We can't say that this is just a job for philanthropy. We have to actually keep asking questions about how the market is going to change. How are we going to challenge capitalist ideals? How are we going to see the job of kaitiaki actually a paid job in our future economy? Because if we don't start asking and actually actively designing ways for people to be paid for these important things, then we are going to continue to rely on the philanthropy of money or time. And it's just far too important for that.
And it's not one or the other. You know, this conference theme is about Whakamana. And so how can we do environmental stuff and yet recognise the health benefits, both physical and mental, in doing so? How can you also realise those social impacts that are being achieved while you're doing collective environmental work at the same time? You whakamana all your entities in your community, you're all better off.
So,
Yes,
you know,
I think
philanthropies, government, but also
Yeah.
communities, and also new types of institutions, new ways of getting people together. I think they're all going to be really important.
We don't want to have too much piecemeal stuff, though, do we? I mean, we all need to be looking roughly in the same direction. Sometimes it's pretty confusing. There are an awful lot of agencies and organisations and who knows what.
Yeah, I mean, so I think part of that problem solving will be new ways of organising ourselves, new ways of bringing together piecemeal efforts. I mean, you know, Give a Little is an example of that, where people can chip in a small amount to create something bigger than the sum of its parts. And so I think we do need to find new ways of doing things.
Sorry, Bruce, you wanted to say?
Well, I was just going to say, reflecting on some comments to my left, it's about how you define environment. People are part of the environment. Human health is part of the environment. The workshop that I've just been to is one which is trying to make the connection between human health and ecological restoration through the current work on what's called microbiome. You know, the whole point about having proper microbiomes in cities where children are exposed to dirt, basically, are able to go outside and do stuff, which then helps their health because they don't have immunity problems and they don't develop asthma because they're surrounded by pine plantations instead of having rich, diverse ecosystems nearby, green space nearby. So I think it's important that we take a holistic view of the environment and the way people fit within it, because actually when we start saying, oh, can we shift more money to environment, what do we mean by environment? We must take a broad view.
There's a question, will philanthropic investment bodies welcome the idea of an independent body of scientists nominated by scientists across the CRIs and Māori groups to evaluate blah, blah, blah.
Self-interest.
You probably know who that's from. Actually, I don't even know what it means.
Do we
Independent
like
body.
the science challenge? Yes.
Well, that's it, isn't it? Right. Is there a place for environmental offsetting, and what environmental trade-offs should we accept when trying to promote a strong economy? Environmental offsetting, I don't know whether that you consider that to be a distraction or a valid tactic.
Well, some people call it environmental compensation. That's a broader view which includes mitigation, includes biodiversity offsetting or whatever it might be. My view, in having participated in many negotiations around environmental offsetting, is at the moment in New Zealand we do not have the right ingredients in place to do fair trades for the environment. I've just been involved in a subdivision hearing where essentially people are saying that by planting a few trees over a period of 3 to 5 years, that will mitigate the potential damage done to a local bat population. It's just not a fair trade. So the rules are clear. There are good published international papers on criteria that would be applied for environmental offsetting, but I'm unaware of any model example in New Zealand yet where this has been done well.
Right. So it's tokenism. Yeah?
I see it differently. I think if we don't start the conversation around costing the environment, then we stop the conversation about valuing it. So we need to see more offsetting, and we need to see more quantification of the trade-offs that are currently in play in the market.
And who's going to do that? Shaun?
Well, and I was just going to add that we kind of have no choice with climate change, right? I mean, offsetting is a big part of our strategy for combating climate change. So we do have to get to grips with this idea. I must admit, you know, in my no-fly year, lots of people talked to me and said, well, why don't you just offset your air miles? And well, it's because we lack this good framework for doing that at the moment. How we get there? Well, science will play a big role in that. I think we do have to, as scientists, we're going to have to get in and develop methods that let us do that.
Why is offsetting? Offsetting's dealing only with the carbon dioxide, right? The greenhouse gases. Is it consistent with our biodiversity needs? Or is it a completely different thing? And if so, why?
I mean, I think, and I'll probably get shot down here, not being an environmental scientist, I mean, I think, the carbon cycle is something that's relatively well understood. I mean, it is a complex system, but we have a bit of a sense of that. I mean, we can trace the carbon that we're pulling out of the ground, the fossil carbon, and we can track it through the environment. I think biodiversity is a much more complicated, it depends on a much more complicated system. And so, I've yet to see really good ways, or at least as a physicist, I haven't been convinced yet that we were on top of that problem.
All right. A perfect example, Bruce, of what I cannot remember, but you will, is Mahu Whenua, our first private national park, and philanthropist Motilanga. Do you support this sort of initiative? What is that about?
So that's a national park that's been set up in the South Island by the millionaire, is he, or a billionaire or a millionaire, Matt Lange. So he's essentially set aside as, I think, the largest Queen Elizabeth II covenant in the country, equivalent to a national park. And yes, the answer is of course, but then the question becomes, what is public access like? Are there any caveats around the use or for recreation or harvest or whatever you might want, traditional harvest? So the answer is yes, but let's see the details about what access is like for the public.
One of the great hailed acts of a rich visiting American is Cape kidnappers in Hawke's Bay. And I don't wish to issue any criticism of it. Julian Robertson, decided it was a great place, and he built a predator-free fence around it. He was a true philanthropist, and everybody loved him. Is he maintaining it? Is a question that has been raised, and I think the answer is no. I think the answer is that the gesture was made, and the follow-up is not necessarily there. And I'm wondering whether a lot of philanthropic effort is along those lines. The big gesture, and everybody says, oh, thank you very much, but the heart is not there to continue with it.
So I can speak to that, maybe at that place, I'm not sure the details exactly right there, but look what it's inspired. Not only did he invest in that particular peninsula and try some things there, but what's followed on from there has been Poutereo, Tāne, and then Cape to City, which is a number of sanctuaries and ecological places around the Hawke's Bay, which collectively can do far more than one place on their own. So from Hawke's Bay to Mahia, Kāweka, and all those places could be joined ecologically soundly, started by the work those guys did there.
But who's going to join them? Like, who's in charge?
Well, that's a community collective question, and I know that the Cape to City whānau that are here are working with iwi, are working with councils, and are working with other philanthropists, and with DOC also to deliver a network of outcomes across that whole landscape.
How can we encourage philanthropy to build a number 9 wire fence at the top of the conservation cliff? Is the fruit in that question for any of you?
So one of the strategies that we're using and we're building with other partners around the country is a set of large landscape scale restoration projects. Predator-free 2050 is jumping in behind them, and there are Taranaki, Maunga, Te Manahuna, Aoraki, Mackenzie country, others that are being thought about in Stewart Island, Auckland Islands, elsewhere, Predator-free Wellington, which together could potentially secure all the biodiversity in New Zealand, or at least have lifeboats to hold it until we figure out how to do it better.
And what, do you need more money for that? Always you need more money for that.
It's actually not really a question of money, it's a question of modes of delivery and capability and real question of trust. How do we build collectives of trust at the places where these projects are?
What does that mean? Why is it an issue of trust?
Because you need to actually trust as was mentioned earlier, trust the philanthropists, have trust in delivery outcomes of those people doing the work, and also have, so iwi who actually are kaicheck at these places are part of that equation and part of the governance of these projects.
Yeah, Aroha.
Yes, how can you tell? One of the many things that came out of the IPBES report, the Global Assessment on the State of the World's Biodiversity, is that those areas that have maintained high biodiversity are largely in indigenous territories. And it isn't coincidental that is where they are, because in those territories, people and nature coexist. And even within conservation science, there's a moving field that is proving that you get better conservation outcomes when people are directly involved and interacting with nature. So I kind of question, as an approach, this continuation of just declaring national parks and protected areas in perpetuity with no real management behind it.
Well, that was what I was worrying about,
yeah,
really.
no, exactly, because our ultimate goal here is not just about the environment, it's about the next generation of people coming through, our descendants, who can connect with the environment and all the species that we have been able to enjoy. And if we keep locking them up, they're not going to be able to achieve that. They need to live alongside them, work out for themselves what it's like to live with species, to help species, to manage their own activities, to minimize the damage to species. That's all part of what a normal life should be like.
Is it not fair to say, I don't know who's best equipped to answer this question, that a lot of our species are essentially not equipped to live alongside us at all, and never will be, because we're alien, we're too alien?
I don't think that's exactly true, but there are certainly many species that require their own spaces, and that's fine. But I still think we can achieve better conservation outcomes by changing the governance that we have of our conservation estate.
And of course, this is what you're onto, Bruce, isn't it? That you want to put nature where people are, essentially.
Yeah, but I'm not using it as a substitute for also having really good reserves in the backcountry, national parks and on offshore islands. So what I'm doing really is taking the approach that it's actually one big system. And if we're ever going to be successful in protecting biodiversity in Aotearoa, New Zealand, we need to do it across a range of different landscapes. And in order to, I guess, have engaged members of the public, to have children in particular reconnected with the environment, unless it's in their own backyard, many of them will never even get the chance to experience it.
This question goes to what I was talking about with Aroha a little earlier. Why trust local communities to protect the environment more than you trust the government? After all, we are the people who drive the capitalist system that does so much environmental damage. And we're all implicated, we're all guilty, we're all part of the system. So who amongst us can throw any stones?
Some have more power than others. You can be part of a system, but not necessarily by choice.
Just because you don't have power, Aroha, doesn't mean that your intentions are necessarily any better than anybody else's. It doesn't imply morality.
In itself, that's quite true.
All right.
But we can certainly go a lot further in exploring that as a viable option to what we currently have, which we can see is not working.
All right. The sense I'm getting from some of you at least is that the idea of philanthropy should not, we tend to put it in a special kind of circle occupied by rich people who have loads of money to spare. Your experience, Nathalie, is that that's not necessarily the case, that lots can come from many people. You questioned motivation, that's another thing. But we should broaden the definition of philanthropy to include what anybody can do. Yeah. Is this correct?
I think this is correct. I think the other thing is making sure we see giving on a continuum, because I developed this kind of way of thinking about it when I was managing Give a Little. Was this giving kind of sits on a maturity continuum, and you need to invite people on at every point that they are ready. So if they're motivated by reputation or the social dynamic of being seen to be giving to something important, you need to take that, embrace it, and ask them to move along on the journey with you. If they're motivated by outcomes and I guess reports and proof that their money was the most efficient money in the system that you're operating with, then you take that and you ask them to move along on the journey with you. But ultimately, where we all need to get to is a place where we're starting to have implicit trust that the things that we're working on are of high value, and so that we start to give our money with less condition, but then move into kind of standing alongside one another and seeing the philanthropists be catalysts, and then ultimately standing alongside us all on the ground and taking direct responsibility. And so we have to sort of see this as starting from one place but moving along the chain. And I think that that's probably the way that I most like to think about philanthropy, is on that continuum.
You're assuming we're all heading in the same direction.
Yeah, but I think we ultimately are because we all face the same threat. And if we don't start having a conversation about that threat, you know more at threat to environmental degradation and climate change if you're rich than if you're poor. So I think if we start having that conversation, then we can line up in the same direction.
Make them feel bad, they won't give you any money.
Oh, no, that's not necessarily the case either. It's a tactic.
The true voice we're not hearing is that of our youth, says a member of the audience. What about integrating the fight for biodiversity into something like Fortnite, which is a thought?
I can speak directly to this. I just came from a hackathon in Gisborne over the weekend, where they're facing the decline of the Rokumura forest and trying to understand how to deploy the, I guess, quite sparse population on the East Cape for that challenge. And a lot of the families there on the weekend said, well, if we could only program a drone to Fortnite and allow our kids to get in there with that would be really interesting. We just have to watch out that they didn't start trying to take each other's drones out in the process. But I think there is definitely something in this. I just don't think we need to be thinking about the values that we want to perpetuate and make sure those are the values that we actually need to see preserved, because I'm not sure that Fortnite's deep in value.
No, possibly not. If there was an area, and let's talk about the environment specifically, if there was an area of the environment, of predator-free New Zealand, of biodiversity, any of that you would like more philanthropic money put into, more, let's broaden it and say philanthropic effort put into. Let me ask you, Bruce, what you would like to see that as.
Well, my answer is going to be an urban biodiversity. Having said that, though, I think there's a range of opportunities there, and one of the significant ones that is extremely valuable is investing in youth, whether it's through some form of scholarship or work internship or something like that, so that we can build the next generation of researchers and environmentalists, people who can actually become part of the ecosystem needed to fix the problem that we've currently got.
And won't bugger off overseas. And won't bugger off overseas.
Ah, yeah,
as soon as they, get their degree, we need to retain people.
Yeah, well, so in some restoration projects that I've been working with, trusts have been set up which provide employment programs for local people,
right,
and embed them back into their community. So it's all of this business of capability development and embedding people into the system so that they stay around for the longer term.
Right.
Yeah.
Short of overthrowing the capitalist system, Aroha, what area do you think would be most deserving of philanthropic money?
Well, I'd like to see more money going into empowering whānau hapu iwi at local level, to utilise traditional knowledge, to try and see, together with Western science, but not always, to look at ecosystem restoration and also saving of our species. It's an area that's still untapped. We don't know the extent to which that could actually provide some really positive outcomes.
Yeah.
Building capability in the 4 Cs of creativity, communication, cultural capability and communication.
Could you be more specific? Like, they all sound really nice words, but what do they
We
mean?
want people to be able to engage together to solve these complex problems.
All right, Shaun.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with that one, actually. I mean, I was thinking about, money that's devolved, that's empowering, that enables action at the community level.
I just say, a lot of our philanthropy comes from people who have become titans of industries. I would like to see more of that leadership back into the business community to really revolutionise the way that our industries are really having their impact and tidying things up, actually.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Please thank the panel, ladies and gentlemen. It's amazingly good for timekeeping, this thing, right?
It's like you work for RNZ and you know how to work to duration.
Working up to the pips.
Up to the peps. Boop, boop, boop. News time.
Thank you.
Tēnā koa, homai te pake ki wenei tēnei pai kōrero katoa. Me te kai arahi ngā kōrero, Kim Hill. Thank you very much for this kōrero. And I guess when we're talking about whakamana, we were talking about whakamana, the money. And how do we whakamana the money while maintaining the mana and the kaupapa? Because volunteers don't get their names on big buildings, do they? Nō reira, kia ora koutou I wena whakaro nui katoa. So we now go beep, beep, beep to afternoon tea. So please enjoy your kai. This is very well designed, isn't it? And we will be back for more Ākina very soon. So please go and enjoy your kai, which will be blessed by our kaumātua tēnā koa, tētahi o kōrua, ne. Tēnā koa hara mai tētahi o kōrua ki te whakatika I wā tātou kai, just to get our kai ready for consumption. Kia ora.